Hello, hello. It is December 3rd, 2025, and we're here with another episode of the live stream. We've got some good stuff for you tonight. Mostly that we're asking the question, where did 2025 go? Oftentimes right after Thanksgiving, that's a question we ask, and it feels like it's really the case this year because it's already December. So, where did 2025 go, Owen?
Daylight hours are low, but campaign energy is high. We're 11 months out from election day, so this next year is going to go by even faster.
Yeah. I feel like we're approaching that time where we will be sort of saying it's not a marathon or a sprint; it is a marathon and a sprint. And people will get tired of us saying that because they'll be like, "Haha, it was funny the first time." But it is true. We're getting into a place where we have to be ready for a long distance, but we also have to be ready to, push hard through each one of these things. But I think, as you're right, the days are long, the temperature is dropping, but the campaign energy is as high as it's been. So
And we're going to new corners of the state. We're having good conversations with people across the state. We're scheduling events. We're getting busy. The General Assembly session coming up, so we've got a lot of irons in the fire.
yeah, and I keep refreshing the General Assembly page. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure there's like a small handful of people, we probably know many of them, who are refreshing the General Assembly page left and right, just trying to figure out like when those pre-filed bills are going to come up. But we know we got ours. We know some others are out there. We'll talk about some of that tonight. We'll talk about what the rest of what we have in store for the rest of December. And then, we're hitting January hard. January 7th is 300 days out from the election. January 14th, the legislative session begins. And January 21st is that first day that we drop our campaign finance reports and show, how many donors we have. Brian, who's our treasurer, he's on the call. I see him in the chat. He's gonna work to get those reports filed. And we're gonna tell a story of how we're succeeding with our public financing effort. And we'll see if other people pick up on it. But I'm looking forward to finishing out December and finishing January. So tonight we're going to do a little bit of review of an awesome November. We had a pretty busy November. A lot of it was on this podcast, but a lot of it happened in other places as well. We don't have a guest tonight, so more time for your questions. We got a bunch of questions that we have from folks that are stacked up. One of the things somebody said to me the other day, Owen, was it's great that you all answer these questions on here, and y'all should keep doing that because most politicians don't do that. And I was like, yes, this person gets the value of this. I was excited to be able to, have those questions out there. And so if you want to ask a question, you can drop it in the chat tonight, or you can go to our specially made questions page right there at gogreen2026.com questions, and we'll get to some of those later. We'll talk about what happened in November, and we got 2 stories to talk about tonight that are our stories to watch. So before we dive into that, is there anything else you want to say, Owen?
Well, just about these questions, I think we have some of the most critical and curious supporters across the political spectrum. Our folks aren't just asking questions from one ideological or political perspective, and they're not asking gotcha questions, but they're very tough questions and require us to go dig deeper into the research and talk to more community organizers and advocates on these issues. So, ask the questions both as a way to express your political curiosity, but also as a way to nudge us towards different areas of research and policy that we would need to be focused on.
Yeah, questions as pedagogical tool and questions as political nudging to make sure we're answering the real questions and not just BSing like
It's
some of
kind
the
of
other politicians.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed a shift since even in the last few months, folks are starting to ask questions because they think that us answering them could have an impact on the ground, and I think that's really exciting. It's a form of leverage that we're going to continue to develop over the coming months.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that somebody said to me at one point that they went to an event that Westmore was at, and they had a question. They had waited for 2 hours for him talking to be able to ask him a question, and he just left. He took some pre-scripted questions and then he left. And I think you got to sit in there and answer questions from people. And I think that's the thing that we're going to do that's different than other campaigns. So go ahead, drop your questions in, either put them in the chat or send them to gogreen2026.com questions, and we will answer them. We'll make sure, even if they're hard or funny or whatever, we'll answer those questions. So
yeah, I mean, just to add a little bit more to that, I've heard similar things about the lieutenant governor. She shows up for photo ops and then is hard to find. And also, going back to that TV spot in which we were asked about our energy policy, there were several other Republican campaigns who were asked, and, these campaigns had some time to prepare. And it was pretty weak gruel what they put forward. It wasn't particularly meaty or substantive. And so I think that's why it's so important to get us up on the debate stage. We've got that petition, hit that petition, share that petition, and we'll be talking about more, moving beyond just petition and activist tools towards some policy and legislative tools. So that's why it's so important to get us in the debates, because we're going to bring the policy, we're going to bring some answers and some proposals that don't fit the typical red, blue cookie cutters, and it's going to be really important.
And we're going to call the Republicans weak gruel. All right.
You heard it here.
Let's get to our stories for the week. I want to start with a story that is really interesting to me. And if you've been following along the campaign for a while, this is a thing that I've been talking about for a while. So 2 weeks ago, the Baltimore Sun ran a story about the public subsidies that Maryland's pro sports teams get. The headline, Orioles and Ravens spur 9-figure spending in Maryland. But is it enough? And, this is a question that I've been asking for over 2 years. In August of 2023, I wrote an op-ed calling for public ownership of the Orioles. Since then, I've written more, done national interviews, added it to our platform, and made the same argument everywhere I go. When it comes to pro sports teams, we're trapped in a false binary. Give the billionaire owner everything they want, or the team threatens to leave. In 2023, when the fear was that the Orioles might leave for Nashville, I started calling this game Nashville Chicken. I want to tell you, though, that there's a third option: public ownership. And tonight, I want to show you not only why it's possible, but why it's necessary. So let me explain how the trap works. The Maryland Stadium Authority is the state agency that subsidizes sports owners. You can see their website up there. Pro stadiums in the big leagues, Camden Yards and M&T Bank Stadium, plus minor league stadiums across the state, and horse racing facilities like Pimlico and the Shamrock facility in Carroll County that we discussed a few weeks ago. All of those are publicly owned. All of them are operated for private benefits. And when Wes Moore became governor, he removed the longtime stadium professionals at the head of this organization, and he put in an ally from Big Law to be in charge of this operation. The business model is public investment, private profit, and Wes Moore has put one of his best men on the job. Now, the way it works is baseball owners or football owners can just threaten to leave. Politicians are terrified of being the guy or the woman who loses a team, so they cave every single time. What does that mean? It means that since 1998, Maryland has committed over $1.3 billion in public benefits to the Orioles, including $600 million authorized in 2022. The Ravens got another $600 million that year for a total of $1.2 billion in 2022, both of them going to teams owned by billionaires. When David Rubenstein bought the Orioles in 2024, he purchased an incredibly profitable business with $600 million in taxpayer-funded upgrades, plus 99-year development rights around the stadium and rent of less than $1 million a year on the prime piece of property in that part of the area. I wrote about it in 2023. It doesn't make sense that one private owner can extort limitless concessions from a city or the state. The word I use there is extortion, and that's the right word today. Back in December of 2023, when the Stadium Authority approved the deal, I said publicly, the next time we have to have one of these negotiations, it's going to be way worse. Because the question is, who has the leverage in these deals? In 15 to 30 years, Camden Yards will be 50 years old, and the next negotiation we have with a billionaire like Rubenstein or whoever he has take over after him won't be about renovations. It will be about whether taxpayers are subsidizing a whole new stadium. We're talking billions next time, not hundreds of millions. That's where the trap leads, unless we change who has the leverage. Now, the next thing I want to talk about here is that the economics of why this is supposed to work are a lie. Here's why the economic justifications for this model are false. First, the University of Chicago surveyed the nation's leading economists. They asked, are stadium subsidies worth the cost? 83% of those economists said no. Kennesaw State did a review of 130 peer-reviewed studies over 50 years and found no statistically significant positive correlation between sports facility construction and economic development. None. And 130 studies over 5 decades. The St. Louis Federal Reserve explains why. It's called the substitution effect. Money spent at stadiums isn't new economic activity. It's money that would have been spent somewhere else. Movies, restaurants, concerts. Your entertainment budget doesn't grow because there's a new club section at Camden Yards. It just moves around and it just shifts around the state. Between 1970 and 2020, governments across the U.S. spent $33 billion on stadiums, and the median public share of that was 73% coming from taxpayer dollars. The North American Association of Sports Economists declared in 2022 that there's no point in studying this anymore because the debate is over. Yet, in 2022, Maryland committed another $1.2 billion. Look, I'm glad the Orioles are staying in Baltimore. I love baseball. I'm an Orioles season ticket holder. I love the Orioles, but I hate these deals. So the question is, who benefits? Let's look at Moore's Orioles deal. $600 million in bonds, 99-year development rights, and essentially no rent. $94 million over 99 years for a ownership company that has Bloomberg and Rubenstein in it. That's less than $1 million a year from some of the richest men in the country. Tom Kelso, the former Stadium Authority chair that Moore replaced with his big law buddy, said hundreds of millions of dollars that belong to the citizens of Maryland will be given to the Orioles to spend as they see fit. Who did Moore put in charge when he fired Kelso? Craig Thompson, his campaign manager and a partner at Venable, the law firm whose employees donate more to Governor Moore than any other Maryland business. 2 months after the deal was signed, David Rubenstein, a private equity billionaire who Moore has been caught hanging out with, bought the team, immediately gained a $600 million taxpayer-funded upgrade, plus 99-year development rights in the heart of Baltimore City. Look, I hope Rubenstein's historical interest in other rich people's philanthropy convinces him to use his power and wealth to save baseball from private equity, tech billionaires, and sovereign wealth funds like he is and is encouraging. I told CBS Sports this. I said, what if his legacy, like the Carnegies before him, is to who left us libraries and universities, is that he helps us figure out how the city and state can own the Orioles forever. I don't have a lot of faith that he will do it, but I'm not particularly anti-Rubenstein. As private equity billionaires go, he's not particularly bad. I am against a system, however, that lets any private owner extract billions and billions of dollars from the taxpayer. Now, here's why reform won't work. The mechanism that the owners use is the relocation threat. Private owners can leave. The Major League Baseball and the NFL have ensured that. They have used their congressional leverage and their leverage with the courts in order to make sure that those teams can't leave. Politicians know it's wrong. They know that this extortion game, this Nashville chicken game is wrong. But no elected official feels like they can survive being blamed for losing the hometown sports team that everybody grew up with. So subsidies for billionaire sports team owners become a bipartisan pursuit, time in and time out. You can't fix this by electing better politicians. The incentive structure dictates the outcomes, not the people in charge. That's why I push for a third option. When I first wrote an op-ed, I said too often it's framed as either give the billionaire owner everything they want or the team leaves. I wanted to introduce a third option so that we're not constantly stuck in that cycle. And so what is the third option? The third option is public ownership. What does it look like? It's not a fantasy, it's reality. The Green Bay Packers prove it works at the major league level. publicly owned since 1923, 538,000 shareholders, never threatened to relocate, doing great. Around the world, public or fan ownership is a regular feature in different sports. But here's a story that's even more relevant to Maryland. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right up the road. In 1995, private owners bought the Harrisburg Senators, a double-A team, and they spent $4.1 million. Immediately, they threatened to move to Massachusetts unless Harrisburg taxpayers financed a new stadium for them. Same playbook we see everywhere. Mayor Stephen Reed of Harrisburg at the time called their bluff. He said, if we want to keep this baseball in Harrisburg, we're just going to have to buy the team. So they did. The city bought the Senators for $6.7 million. They ran the team as a municipal enterprise like water or electricity. The results, the team generated $250,000 to $500,000 in annual profits. They won a lot. They set records in the Eastern League while under public ownership. And when the city eventually sold the team, they got $13.25 million, nearly double what they paid, plus a binding 29-year commitment to keep the team in Harrisburg. Now, let's be real. The price tag of the Orioles is too high. Rubenstein isn't selling, and Major League Baseball has used their congressionally provided antitrust exemption to stop any efforts at public ownership. But Harrisburg shows us the real third option and the real practical solution, and it starts at the minor league level. Don't pay the ransom, don't lose the team, buy the team from the city or the state, run it profitably, and if you do have to sell, capture the profits. Now, in Maryland, beyond the Orioles, we have 6 other professional baseball teams, and the relocation game happens here at that level too. Aberdeen is getting millions of dollars in state funds for Ripken Stadium while losing its Orioles affiliation. Frederick is getting $39 million. Both teams and the Chesapeake Bay Sox and the Spire City Ghost Towns are owned by a Virginia company, Attain Sports. Attain decides which city in our state gets the real team under private ownership in stadiums that we own. In my first op-ed in 2023, I said we should consider public ownership, including the minor league teams that play in publicly financed cities. Harrisburg proves that it works, and here's the thing that most Marylanders don't know. In 1984, the General Assembly gave Baltimore eminent domain authority over professional sports teams in Baltimore City. They did it to try to stop the Colts from leaving, and that proved that the authority can exist in other counties as well. We should make sure our counties and our state have that authority with teams that play in stadiums we pay for. Even if we never use that authority, that credible threat gives us negotiating power. It changes the leverage. This is why Major League Baseball fights against it, because they know it works. So we say this: start with the minor leagues, prove out the model, build the infrastructure and the public support for public ownership. Then when the next major league negotiation comes with a billionaire and his family, and it will, because that's how it works, we will have the experience, the leverage, and the alternative baked into our laws in Maryland. So I want to go over some key facts and numbers here. There are 7 professional baseball teams in Maryland. It is the Orioles and 6 minor league teams. All of them play in publicly financed stadiums. 83% of economists thinks that it is a bad idea to use public stadiums or to use public subsidies on stadiums. $1.3 billion have gone to the Orioles since 1988. That's a lot of money, and a lot of economists who don't think this can work. Now, what do we do about it? The 2026 legislative session starts in January, and I'm calling for what I called for 2 years ago. Bring public ownership to the General Assembly. I don't care if we get it all done this year, but commission a study, start the conversation, do whatever we need to in order to make sure this is an option for our counties so that whatever team they have there in a publicly financed city doesn't pick up and leave like Aberdeen did and like Frederick has done in the past. It's in our platform, and it should be part of the agenda of every politician in the state. The Baltimore Sun asked, is it enough? My answer is it will never be enough as long as private owners can extort us. There's a third option, and I've been talking about it for a long time: public ownership and community controls. It's not subsidize or lose the team. It's buy the team and run it as a public utility. Let's choose that option and make Maryland the state that saves baseball from itself. All right. So that's my thing for the day. What do you think, Owen?
Yeah, I just know that you've been organizing around this issue for years, and the way you've integrated it into the campaign is kind of a model for what we're trying to do here. We're trying to lift up local organizing. We're trying to raise the attention or the salience of certain issues that are important to thousands of people in a smaller community or millions of people across the state, and to empower local organizers. So I saw in one of those pictures you had our guy Bill Marker there. So shout out to Bill. Right, you had a really good running mate, and you may not have agreed on every partisan affiliation or that sort of thing, but there was a real mutual respect that I saw developing there. I've known Bill for many years now, and so I think that kind of story of how when a statewide campaign for the most powerful office in the land attaches and connects to local issues and local organizing specifically, and doesn't just treat itself as a platform for policies, but treats itself as a launching pad for more powerful organizing, then we start to really have momentum for grassroots initiatives to be empowered through this campaign.
Totally. And, I think that story with Bill is a really good one. I wrote this original op-ed. Me and Matt Stannard, who is my friend and has been on this issue for a long time, we wrote this original op-ed, and Bill sent me a note that was like, I don't want to talk about this Green Party stuff, but I do want to talk about this stadium stuff. And Bill had been involved in these stadium struggles for a very long time. And we talked and we worked together. Bill and I ended up at one point flyering in 2023 during the Orioles, great season during the playoff run. We were flyering outside of Camden Yards with flyers that said, "Save our Orioles, keep the team here." And I was loving it. It was so great. And afterwards, Bill said to me, he said, "How do you feel about this? How do you feel it went?" And I'm like, "Bill, I'm normally out there asking people to vote for the Green Party." And, 1, 5, 10% of people are excited about that. I'm at an Orioles game saying, "Keep the Orioles in Baltimore." I love this kind of canvassing. And Bill was like, "Oh, I hadn't thought about it that way." And it's like, sometimes the hard work we do of asking people to vote outside the two-party system makes it much easier to go and say, "Keep the Orioles in Baltimore outside of the stadium," So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like athletes who train in those high altitude chambers. Once we get down and we're running at sea level, or handing out flyers outside of Camden Yards, then everything becomes easier by comparison. And throughout some of these podcasts and throughout the campaign, we've kind of talked about different kinds of activists, different kinds of advocates. And one thing I really love about Bill, he's a very community-oriented person. He's not a gatekeeper, and he's willing to mix it up sometimes with the powers that be. And so those are the kind of folks that, even if there's not perfect alignment on electoral strategy, that we can really do important organizing with when it relates to community organizing and activism and wedging issues, so that the folks with the power, who in Maryland all have D's next to their names, feel some of the heat.
Totally. And I hope Bill's going to vote for us. I'm not sure. I don't think it's guaranteed, but I hope out of this we convert him and get a longtime DSA guy who believes that his path is through the Democratic Party to secretly and quietly vote for us. He doesn't even have to tell everybody; he can just tell me. So,
yeah, I know we're going to get a lot of those.
I think we're going to get a lot of those. Do you want to do your story?
Sure. Let's go for it. So I'll start kind of from a personal place here. And, earlier this week, I went out to Allegany County and I met with some activists on the ground there, Dave and Rebecca and Michelle. And we were talking about water, but we were talking about water in a way that not only intersected with Green Party values and our campaign's platform, but also sort of my evolution as an activist. And a lot of my early activism was related to Latin American solidarity work. And it brought me, meeting with them up in the mountains in Western Maryland, kind of brought me back to some work I had done in El Salvador. I remember being, in a mountain town there, and I was interpreting or translating for a water defender who was kind of putting his life on the line, pushing back against these big multinational mining corporations solely so that his community and other communities in that area would have clean drinking water, and it wouldn't all be contaminated by the mines. And so I think, in the U.S., in Maryland, we're not always at that point where activists in Allegany County or other places are directly risking life and limb, but the temperature is certainly rising out there, and the living conditions are abhorrent, what folks are having to deal with the high cost of water. And so we wanted to spend some time tonight and throughout the campaign shining a spotlight on what's happening in Allegany County outside of some of the areas that have publicly owned and managed water utilities, and in areas where they're paying outrageous water rates. We're talking $400 to $900 a month for water, because it's being provided in large part because it's being provided by private corporations who are seeking to profit off of people's ability to bathe, cook food for themselves and their families, and drink a glass of water. So one of the most basic human needs is being commodified for profit, and it's in part a result because of lack of investment at the local and state level in having sufficient infrastructure for water. So the one thing that I think the activists out there have done a really good job, they've created a paper trail. They've gotten some of the local newspapers to start covering this, and they've put a lot of pressure on their local elected officials, who out there are almost all Republicans. So folks who are watching from other parts of Maryland that are maybe more used to holding Democrats accountable for the rising cost of their utilities. Or in Baltimore City, we have schools where students can't drink the water, for example. Out there, they're pushing their Republican elected officials to declare or to call on the governor to declare a state of emergency, which would allow for the state to get involved in addressing these unending spiraling costs of water. So there is something that is on the table that Governor Moore could do to provide immediate relief to folks out in Allegany County who are suffering from water bills that are more than their rent, more than their mortgage. Really ridiculous numbers we're talking about here. And we have to ask, why isn't the governor willing to take that action? And we also, as candidates for that office, need to ask ourselves, what can we do to be in solidarity with those folks who are organizing on the ground, who are applying that pressure, who are coming up with solutions, who are doing the research, who are mobilizing, who are showing up to public meetings and hearings, who are, following the money and seeing that some of these costs are a result of mergers and acquisitions that treat a basic human need like water as something that should be commodified for profit. So, shout out to the local organizers that I met with earlier this week. And thank you for teaching me about what's going on out there. We've got a lot more to learn, and we're developing this platform exactly to support the kind of organizing that you're doing there, and organizing that will be platforming across the state. So what are some important key facts to keep in mind? As I mentioned before, imagine this, your water bill, which most folks are used to seeing in the 2 digits, recently have started to climb into, low 3 digits. Out there, some of these water bills are over $500, approaching $1,000 a month. That is not affordable, especially because we know the cost of electricity is going up, cost of eggs is going up, all over we're getting hit in our pocketbooks from left and right. And so there's it's an untenable situation for these folks. And reading some of the descriptions in the local newspapers like the Cumberland Times News, I mean, it makes you want to cry when you hear about folks rationing water, families showering together to save water, not using the indoor toilet, taking water out of streams and creeks nearby, going to the Y or going to Frostburg State to shower. I mean, these are conditions that folks in Maryland, one of the richest states in the country, should not be living in, right? This is not a situation that we should be allowing to continue. And so we across the state should really be showing up and supporting these organizers here who are trying to defend their ability to afford their water on a monthly basis. When we start to ask questions about why these water costs have shot up over the past few months and the last few years, as well as over a couple of decades, we have to follow the money trail. And there was a recent acquisition by the American Water Works Company of elements of the Nexus Water Group for $315 million. So, we're talking these small numbers. I only pay $100 a month, or I pay $150 a month for water. There's no profit there, right? Well, if you're saying that, if you're thinking that, then you're fortunate. You have on some level some advantage or some unearned privilege based on where you happen to live, a place where there's a municipal or county water system that, exactly as you may have been thinking, doesn't seek to profit every time you turn on your kitchen sink. But in folks in unincorporated parts of Allegany County who are now paying their water bills to these corporations, that's not the situation they're dealing with. And so when you talk about one publicly traded corporation buying up across an 8-state region utility operations for over $300 million, that they're not investing that kind of money unless they expect to see return on that investment. And that means higher prices for folks in places like Allegany County. And one thing that really hit me when I was out there listening to some of these local activists is that the person sitting to the left of me was paying a different rate than the person to the right. And that's because the person to the right of me lives within city limits in Cumberland, and the person who's sitting to the left of me lives just outside of them. And so part of our platform is to make it easier for folks in their communities to form new municipalities and have those municipalities recognized by the state of Maryland, which is really something that hasn't happened much in the past, half century or so in Maryland. And so when we talk about 1,200 people, those are 1,200 people that we should be in solidarity with. Our campaign should be a platform for them to express their needs and to call on the governor to take all necessary action to address their suffering, because those aren't conditions that anyone in Maryland or really anywhere should be living in.
Yeah, totally. This is a great story, Owen. I'm really glad that you were able to go out there, talk to David, Rebecca, and Michelle about it. David is a Green Party leader. He has been raising this issue since April or May, and we've been paying a little bit of attention to it, but I'm really happy that you had the opportunity to take the drive out there, talk to those folks, and connect with them. I think we're going to be going back out in the winter. No better place to be in January than Cumberland. So I think we're going to head out there this winter and do more of that. One of the things that I think is really interesting on this is there's so many different points of leverage where people in Annapolis could do something if they wanted to solve this. They could declare a state of emergency like the local folks are asking for and the local electeds are asking for, and use those emergency powers in order to curtail what's happening here. They could have the public service, so I think you say American Water Company purchased Nexus Water Group. Well, that's going to have to come before the Public Service Commission, and the Public Service Commission in Annapolis is going to have to decide whether or not that sale goes through. And it could be that they hint to them right now and signal to them right now that they're going to put conditions on this that say they haven't done that. But there's been no suggestion of that so far. The last time a rate increase came in front of the Public Service Commission for this water issue, the Public Service Commission approved it. One of the things that I've heard from some folks out there is that Democrats in Annapolis would be doing everything they could if this were happening in one of the counties that elects Democrats. But because it's happening in a county that elects Republicans, they're blaming Trump, they're throwing their hands up, and they're not doing the things they could in order to stop people from having to pay $900 a month water bills. It's ridiculous. It's corporate greed, and it's running unchecked by the regulators here in Maryland because they don't like the people who it's happening to.
Yeah, I think it's one of the clearest examples of why we need a multi-party democracy, because in most parts of the state and at the state level as a whole, we don't really have a two-party system. We have one dominant power, and in the West, it's Republicans, and that means that their issues aren't well addressed by Democrats at the state level and in Annapolis. And if we had a multi-party system where both Democrats and Republicans had to compete for votes from multiple directions ideologically, and also had to worry about being out hustled by organizers in their communities like David, like Rebecca, like Michelle, then they would be much more accountable to their voters. And so, that's where this intersects, along with the municipalization component, with our democracy platform. I think there's also a way in which it touches on our ecological wisdom component, right? This idea of water being a natural resource, being a human right, and concerns that I heard from some of the activists out there about contamination of groundwater, of drinking water from fracking in Pennsylvania or other mineral extraction in West Virginia, and also local polluters here in Maryland too. So I think there's a connection to the democracy piece. There's a connection to our ecological wisdom pillar of the Green Party values, and certainly it's a matter of justice. Someone in Allegany County shouldn't be paying 5, 6, 7 times more for a glass of water out of their faucet than someone just a couple counties over. So all aspects of our Green Party values really connect to this story, and it's one that we're gonna keep following and keep lifting up, because folks need to drink water, right? It's a human right, it's a basic need, and when you commodify it and privatize it and sell it in multi-hundred-million-dollar corporate deals, the people who are going to lose are the local folks in their communities.
Yep, totally. And one thing else I want to say on this is one of our team members and supporters and volunteers, Christy, has been doing some MPIA requests coming out of some of the stories that we're doing here so far. She's already following. She had been doing work on the AI Anthropic Claude deal well before we started talking about it, and she has been pushing on that. And I imagine this is another type of thing where we could push on. I think all of these stories that we're doing that are about things that should be getting much more coverage than they are in the mainstream press are all about money, are all about power, and are all about corporate greed and the way that Maryland enables those things. And I think it's great to have folks out there who are taking the tools that they have at their disposal to follow up and to try to get some transparency on it. And I think we need to have some of those folks come on, tell what their experiences are. If you are interested in learning how to file an MPIA request about something that is Maryland public information that you should be able to have access to, let us know. We will walk you through it. If you hear one of these stories where you think there has to be more to this and you want to see the paper trail, hit us up, let us know. We'll connect you with folks that can work on that. And we need to shine light on these things, because what it is politicians allowing corporations, in order to use their greed and their profit motive, in order to buy up public goods and sell them back to us at incredible prices. We hear all of this talk about affordability, and oftentimes this is framed as a question that happens in the cities and in the suburbs and things like that. But I think it's a thing that is happening everywhere, and it is because there's unchecked corporate greed that our regulators aren't doing anything about, other than enabling. So thank you for bringing this story. Thank you for going out there. This is one we're going to have to follow for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, how you feeling?
Feeling good. I'm back in Baltimore after a few hours driving from the West, and learning about what's going on out there. And that's one of the things that I really want to reflect on as we're starting to think about what we accomplished in November, the year out from Election Day, and as we move to under a year out, there's a lot of reflecting as we're going forward, and it can feel like you're being pulled in multiple directions, but also that's a good workout, like like the metaphor we used before.
Yeah, totally. And as always, the two-party system is a trap. There's an answer to it. Vote green. Get yourself out of the trap. Take that third way. Take that people-powered way, and avoid the belief that this is the best we can do, because we know we deserve a democracy that works and a state that works for all of us. So with that, let's get into this November recap. We got a couple of things that we did in November that we're going to talk about here. And then we're going to get to some of those much vaunted questions that we talked about before. So November 3rd, a year out from Election Day 2026, and the day before Election Day 2025, we got together at one of our favorite places, Maggie's Farm. It's a business that we've supported and has been supportive of us. A great place, great food, great drinks, great people. And we had some of our supporters there. We had a nice dinner. We talked about this concept of the next year is going to be really busy. And we talked about public financing, and we heard why people were there. We had a great night. I think one of the best things about it was the custom drinks that we had. We had a mocktail that was called the Owen and a cocktail that was called the Andy. And we had, vegan food, meat food, everything. It was just nice, inclusive, and a great way to celebrate with our friends and family as we thought about a year, being a year away from Election Day. It feels like it's hard to remember that was this month, but it was, and we had some great times there, and we're going to be trying to do events like that all over the state in the future. What did you think about that event, Owen?
Yeah, people didn't want to leave. People were having a good time. We kind of they opened, first of all, Maggie's Farm on Hartford Road opened for us, which was really thoughtful and appreciated. And the staff was having a good time. Attendees were having a good time. It did not, if I may say so, feel like a traditional fundraiser. It wasn't icky. I mean, some of my longtime organizer friends said, "Oh, this was a fundraiser. I thought we were just supposed to come and buy food and have a good time. I'll get you a donation my next paycheck." So I think that's a sign of how we're doing things differently. This is not an extractive campaign. This is not a transactional campaign. This is a community building and a movement building campaign. And folks are developing new skills. You mentioned Christy developing those skills. People are applying skills through their work. So some of these graphics in the photo booth were set up by my wife, Marion, who runs her own small business and is a musician, a singer. And so we're seeing people apply these skills that they have in professional contexts and activism contexts for the first time in some cases to an electoral campaign. And that, I think, is what is going to help us meet some of our goals, whether it be fundraising, participation in the debates, is folks who saw electoral campaigning as something that other people did, saw fundraising as something someone else was involved with, but wasn't their thing, saying, actually, this is the first campaign that I actually want to donate to. I think, you saw some of Dana's friends were feeling that way, right, Andy?
Yeah. And, so next week we're going to get together with a group of folks and we're going to talk about how people who support us can support us, how they can ask their friends to support us. It's easy enough for you and I to be like, well, we know all the arguments about why third parties are good and what we're doing here. But I think for folks that are new to this can be kind of daunting because there's a real social isolation, especially in a place like Baltimore, that occurs when people, are not Democrats, right? 80% of folks are Democrats here, and there's a thing that can happen where you say, "Well, I'm supporting the Green Party candidate," and people can look at you and be like, "Really?" And I think having these conversations with folks, getting an opportunity for people to get together and talk about these things, creates real opportunity for folks to learn how it is to talk about this stuff, because there's so much social pressure around accepting the two-party system is the best we can do, that I think it's useful to have events like this. And so what I would say here is, if you have a place near you, we love this place, it's in our neighborhood, it's a place we go to all the time. If you have a place where you'd like to have us have a dinner, let us know, get in touch with us, and we'd love to do these around the states at places that you love, that wanna help support this. It's not going to be a hard fundraising ask. It's just going to be a chance to get together, have dinner. That doesn't mean we won't make an ask, but the purpose of it is to get people together, have a nice dinner, support a local business, and have good conversation. So,
yeah, we'll be down in Leonardtown in February, so it'd be great to meet up with some folks down there. Around our event at the library. Maybe we could get together for a coffee or go out for a meal after the conversation at the library. So Southern Maryland, I haven't been down there yet for the campaign. It's one of the few parts of the state I haven't been to yet for the campaign. I actually haven't been to MoCo yet. I haven't been to Montgomery County yet since I joined the ticket. So would love to do something in Montgomery.
We'll have to take care of that. So one of the things we're working on for 2026 is a whole bunch of events. We're going to do things like our library. We're going to continue our small table library meetings. We're going to go west, east, north, south. We're going to go to the blue parts, the red parts, the purple parts. We're going to go all over. 2026 is good. You're going to see us all around. One thing we're encouraging folks to do is to invite us. Part of the reason that Owen was out in LaVale is because they invited us to come out and talk to them about what was going on there. So if you want us to come to your area, let us know. We'll set up a time to come to a library. We can set up a dinner. We can set up a coffee, whatever. We want to talk to people who have issues, want to share them, and want to bring the campaign to their neighbors, to their friends, to their family. So let us know. We'll be having more of that coming in 2026. But this was a great event to kick off the month. Owen, why don't you take us to the next topic, which is public financing? And I got this slide here that's got some of our numbers on it, and I wanna have you take us through that. You worked really hard on this month, and so take it away.
Yeah. So the way we're looking at our fundraising, to get to the public match, we need 1,500 individual donors who are citizens and permanent residents of Maryland to donate a total of at least $120,000. And so right now we're focusing on folks that we know personally for the most part. And that has helped us get to over 5% of our goal for match eligible donors. That's where you see that 84 number in the bottom left, almost $5,000, which is a little bit under 5%, which means that we're getting a lot of small dollar donors. A lot of people were vibing with that $5 Fridays ask. Sometimes you ask for 5, people want to give 10 or 20. But we have a lot of folks who don't have it in their budget to write a big check for politics. And so we appreciate those folks a lot for being first-time donors. The next ring is going to be peer-to-peer fundraising. People who have contributed, and really the maximum is $250. So after someone gives that or gives whatever they can afford, then the next step is for them to get their networks engaged, to start reaching out to their friends. And so we're going to be developing some tools, templates and some suggested wording that you can use when you send that text message or send that email or make that phone call. Just a few days ago, we were talking about this with our campaign team, and I received an out of the blue request. Somebody was running for some office in DC. I had met this person who was asking me, a couple of times, and kudos to that person for downloading all of their email contacts and sending out this request. I mean, that's one way to go about it, but it's not the most relational way. And so we really want to develop some skills in which people learn how to do grassroots fundraising, because once you learn how to do it, then you can do it not just for our campaign, but for your campaign or your friend's campaign, for your nonprofit, for your Baltimore community fridge, for mutual aid projects, for an organization that you really believe in. And so learning capacity building is not a side effect of this campaign. It's really one of the foci of this campaign. So moving to the top right corner, that 4,825, based on the various tiers of per dollar match, would work out to $26,000. So a significant amount of money that can really help us start to be viable towards meeting our goals for this campaign. And then in the bottom right, you see how many days we have. I actually hadn't seen this number until just now, Andy. So it makes me feel determined, but also, there's multiple clocks ticking with this campaign, right? There's the clock ticking to the Green Party primary. There's the clock ticking, to the deadline for submitting for public matching financing. There's early voting. There's election day. So keeping all these, clocks ticking in my head at the same time, is a challenge, but it's one I'm up for.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to surprise you with my fancy infographic on the call, but I thought it was good to have it in some way that we could keep. And I think we're going to keep updating these numbers, so that people can see the progress. The thing, I like the 4.1 and the 5.6%. That is good for our first month, just reaching out to our contacts. And that is not hard asks. That is, there's a group more of folks that we can reach out to. I think we are going to be in good shape for that first time where we have to show our work and show our numbers in January. We're not going to get there all right away and quickly. I think the big campaigns that are running as Democrats and Republicans have the opportunity to use the mainstream media and things like that. And people understand the concept of donating to that kind of campaign in order to get public financing. We have to teach people to think about funding third parties in a way that oftentimes gets ignored in third party discourse. Too many people in third parties are upset about the power that money has on politics, so they don't focus on raising that money. And that is an understandable approach, but it is one that is not going to work. If our analysis is right about the effect that big money has on politics and the effect that big money has on water bills and stadiums and all of those different things, we have to have some resources in order to fight against those people and represent the people who feel left behind. So this part of the campaign is about building out that capacity. I'm really excited about this number in the top right, the potential matching funds. I think this really shows the power of using this type of system in order to be able to use public dollars that come from bad politicians who have to pay fines and fees in order to have the kind of money that we would never be able to have otherwise. Extrapolate that out. Imagine that we get to $120,000. We're looking at $800,000 that a Green Party campaign would have in August of 2026 going into the general election. That's the kind of thing we haven't seen in Maryland in a long time. That's the kind of thing that can reach a lot of voters and can show folks that the two-party system is a trap, that billionaires run both parties, and that we need a people's party like the one that we're building. So thank you for doing these numbers. Thank you for Owen is taking the lead on a lot of this fundraising stuff while I'm working on some other things. I'm going to catch up this month, I promise. But Owen has done a lot to make sure that these numbers look really good and to make sure that we have a system in place to keep pushing. So I'm excited to see where this goes. And as a reminder, here's how your donation grows. $5 becomes $40. So if you got $5 on a Friday to spend because times are tough and eggs are expensive and water is expensive and the Orioles are charging you more and everywhere you turn, more and more money is coming out of it, give us $5. It'll turn into $40. If you got $250 lying around, we'll take that too. That turns into $800. It gets us closer to the goal. And each one of these has a story that we will be telling over time about this. So, are we good on public finance, Owen?
I'll just add, Andy, you mentioned that if we hit our goal and we're getting that $700,000 or $800,000 check from the state of Maryland, right now we have send us your questions and we'll answer them on the air. At that point, we're going to be soliciting, send us your ideas for billboards, right? We'll be able to do this show on a much bigger platform, on billboards that drivers across the state will see. We'll be able to be on radio, we'll be in newspapers, and we'll be able to hire activists who are doing good work in their communities to also connect that work to this campaign. And so that's where this money goes. And thank you so much for your support.
I can't wait to see us up on a big billboard at like Camden Yards, using that taxpayer dollars to stream our show. I don't know if Wes Moore and his guy at the Stadium Authority who is going to like that too much, but we'll see what we can make happen. And maybe at the minor league, maybe one of those minor league stadiums, we can be like, here's $1,000 or something. Put us up on the billboard in Frederick. But
absolutely.
I'm excited about that. Billboards were one of the greatest things that happened during the Jill Stein campaign, and I would love it if we could have billboards all over the state so people know the two-party system is a trap. Billionaires run both parties, and you do have a choice. You do have an alternative. So, all right, moving on. This live stream is a thing that we put a lot of time and effort into this month. I'm really excited about the work that we're doing, and I think it's going to be an important part of our platform going forward. Third parties do not have the kind of media access in order to tell their stories and shape their narratives that the other parties have. And so I think what we are doing here is creating our own means of storytelling, our own means of audience interaction, and our own means of platforming some really important people that are doing tremendously good work. So I think we've gotten a good cadence on this. We've been thinking about what works and what doesn't. We've been doing good stories on things to watch that are triggering MPIA, or that are helping to, get MPIA requests filed, that are putting real pressure on folks, and that are getting stories out there that need to be told. We're also having a time to do these deep dives on our platform, and a time to be able to have the conversations with the people like Lawrence, Taylor, and Heroi, who came on this month and told us amazing stories about on-the-ground activism they are doing that would benefit from having a multi-party system to have their back, because neither Democrats or Republicans want the liberatory, people-based work that they're trying to do. So this live stream has been a great opportunity for us. I think we started it out. I don't know if we knew how it was going to go, but I think I'm now very convinced that video and a platform like this is a key means of us spreading our message, telling the world what we're about, and getting new audiences and new interaction. So I'm excited about it. It's going to grow as we get into 2026. I think we're going to take a couple of weeks off at the end of this month, a few shows in December, and then we'll be back in January when the General Assembly session starts, really ready to go and really ready to bring the good analysis, the good commentary, and the good conversation to a wider audience than we'd be able to get if we just relied on the mainstream media to give us this kind of platform.
Yeah, and I'm looking at these faces and also thinking about the folks that I connected with in Western Maryland earlier this week. And I think we're getting some pretty good coverage. So we've got Lawrence from Baltimore, Taylor, Prince George's, Heroi, Howard, met with folks in Allegany. So it sounds like we need to talk to some Eastern Shore activists, some Southern Maryland activists, go back to those folks that you were organizing with around another shady stadium deal in Frederick, for example, or folks in Montgomery County who are doing lots of really good work, and continue to lift up the local organizing from all corners of the state, especially in places where people have been taken for granted because, this is a dark blue county or that's a dark red county. And that's the trap that we need to break out of and give folks the power to say, no, I have somewhere else I can go with my vote. What are you going to do for me now?
Totally. Give people like Lawrence and Taylor and Heroi the leverage they need to get the changes they're fighting from. Look, I don't think we're going to suddenly take power, replace the Democrats, and implement the agenda that we've laid out, that these folks have laid out. We understand that this is a struggle. We understand that it is difficult. And Lawrence and I were part of a Baltimore Racial Justice Action panel where we looked at these questions. We looked back on 2025 and forward to 2026. and thought about the way that we can use third parties in order to advance racial justice, in order to give people who are fighting the good fight the leverage they need in order to get the outcomes that they want for their community. At the end of the day, it is not about vanity. It is not about making us, getting us more views on YouTube or even getting us more votes. It's about making it so that LBS can help stop auto charging young people as adults in the state with the highest youth incarceration state in the country. It's about making Taylor giving Taylor the tools that she needs to stop her county council from approving a data center that is going to serve billionaires and pollute her community. And it's about helping Heroi to have the power he needs in order to get his county to invest ethically instead of investing in war, pollution, and the extractive economy. So I'm excited about the opportunity we have to use our platform as leverage in order to get other people to change the material outcomes in their community. And I look forward to bringing on some of those Western Maryland folks to talk about it too, so we can figure out how it is that our platform can help them pay reasonable water bills instead of having to pay $400 or $900 to some corporation that has such a good profit motive that, the British Columbia pension fund is investing in it, right? So all of this connects to stuff on the ground. The live stream is a really important aspect of it. And I was on Edie and Scott's show last night doing a telethon to help raise money for the Illinois Green Party. And they are one of the real sort of pioneers of this Green Party live stream platform. And I think they have shown that it works, that we can build audience, that we can increase reach. And so I think we need keep platforming the folks that we're working with. We need to work with the other people in this network, and we need to make sure we're creating this opportunity for us to tell our stories on our terms and not be dependent on anybody else's camera time or mic time in order to do it.
The other element of this that I'm picking up on is the diversity of tactics, right? So Heroi is doing a local ballot initiative at the county level. Taylor's going viral on social media. Lawrence is introducing legislation at the state level. And so this is really a seminar, a public seminar on how to do effective radical or grassroots organizing, from one side of the state to the other.
Absolutely.
We can all learn from each other.
Absolutely. All right. Keep tuning into the live stream. We know if you're watching, you're already tuning in, but we think this is part of the political work, not just part of our, Owen and I liking to talk. We do like to talk, but this is part of the political work, and we're excited to be doing it. So let's go next to this. We touched on this a little bit, but LaVale.
Yeah. So I think this was right on the border between November and December, but let's keep it in November. This was something, I think you connected me with some of these folks, and, they come from, different life experiences. They have different skill sets, complementary skill sets, different social networks. And so when you get folks like that together with shared values around a table at a local fast food joint, in the dark winter night, good things are going to happen. And so there was a lot of listening on my end. I think, the calendar invite I sent them was Owen listens to y'all. And that's really what it was. I wasn't there to sell them on the campaign. They were already supportive because of the connections that you had made out there in Allegany County, Andy. But I was learning a lot about the issues, really good conversations with Rebecca about how food and music bring people together. Learned a lot about fracking from Michelle, not just the traditional kind of sustainability concerns, but, we were talking earthquakes, we were talking radioactivity, we were talking septic. So there was a lot of good stuff there. And, David is so involved with this water issue and so many others, and has such a depth of knowledge about local communities. We were talking about transportation. Used to be able to take a train from Cumberland to Baltimore down to DC, and now folks in this part of the state that there's not as many new jobs being created there as other places. The population is not growing there the way it is in other places at a time when they need public transportation and connections to other parts of the state and other parts of the tri-state region the most, the opposite is happening, and they actually have less access to mobility than they did in years past. So it was a really wide-ranging conversation. And then, of course, we talked about our cats and our pets and brother-in-law's tractors. I mean, I don't have a brother-in-law, but my sister-in-law doesn't have a tractor, but she does have cats, right? So, we were able to also have a really good time, and we can, I felt like I walked away from that conversation with 3 new friends, not 3 new supporters from the campaign, right? And knowing that I can go into that space, and that's kind of understood that this is about building networks and relationships and friendships that will live on hopefully for many years beyond the next 11 months. Like, the point of me going out there was not to get 3 votes or 3 volunteers or 3 donations. It was about building for the long haul movement that we need in order to bring justice, peace, democracy, and ecology to our state and to our world.
Yeah, and I think so often we think of political work as, I don't want to go to that place unless 1,000 adoring fans are in an arena cheering for me and holding up my picture or something. Like, I don't think that happens for most people who aren't running for president in a movie. But like, I think that one of the most important things that we do is have these very small table conversations where we listen to people who are doing work, living life, and have things to share with us. And so I'm excited in 2026 to drive out there, to go out there several times, and to go where people ask us to go. And whether it is a library or a park or a Wendy's in LaVale, right? Like, we want to go to these places, we want to talk to folks, and we want to make sure we're building the connections with people in order to have the kind of experience that you had this weekend, and bring back an ability to do a whole one of our featured stories on something that you learned out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Keep doing the good work out there, and Michelle, Rebecca, and David. We got your back, and we'll be showing up for you, and we know that's mutual. That's solidarity.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about one last thing that happened in November.
Where's the applause for this?
Okay, I got you.
We haven't had any. Just because we don't have guests doesn't mean we can't applaud.
We'll do it again. Excellent. So what is happening here is, and we've hinted at this and we've teased at it a little bit, but I think we're ready to go official with it and to talk about it. So we have one of our core campaign goals is to open up access to the Maryland public television debates so that more candidates are able to participate in them. Right now, Maryland Public Television hosts debates, and they say that they're only going to host debates for people that have for candidates and third parties that have more than 10% in the polls. In 2022, a group of small party candidates petitioned MPT in order to try to allow them into the debate. MPT said no, and so we've decided that we're going to take some other approaches to this. And so what we have worked on, and we'll get into more details about who's involved and all that, but there's a bill that is going to be introduced in the Maryland General Assembly that conditions Maryland Public Television's funding on them opening up the debate stage to all candidates. This is a really good way to address this problem, because even if we were to get them to agree to the petition and they signed it, that is not going to do anything for future generations. Future generations would have to fight, they'd have to petition, they'd have to do all of that. We think this should be a process that is easy. If you are on the ballot in the general election and taxpayer-funded television is hosting a debate, then everybody who's on the ballot in the general election for a statewide office should be on the stage. This bill is going to be a big focus of what we put our attention on in Annapolis this session. I will be down there for opening day. We will be talking to folks as much as we can, and we will be framing a lot of other issues through the importance of having a multi-member debate in the general election. Look, at the end of the day, the mechanism that we're using is a little bit harsh. right? It is telling him it is a threat to defund Maryland Public Television unless they agree to open up their debate stage to all candidates who are on the ballot in the general election for a statewide office that they host a debate for. It's not the most subtle, it's not the most diplomatic of mechanisms. It might be the opposite of that. But I think it's a really important conversation to have, and it's really only a problem for Maryland Public Television if they fight this. I would tell anybody who's thinking about this right now that the easiest path forward is to not fight this. But it's sort of like quicksand. If you start fighting against this bill, I imagine you're going to find yourself in a position that you don't want to be in, defending values that you don't want to defend. And we might find out that some of the donors that are those big foundations that are behind Maryland Public Television are the ones that are pushing them and the politicians to do this. So I'm excited about this. It's going to be a big issue for us going into the General Assembly. And while the mechanism feels coercive, I ultimately think that this bill is good for Maryland, good for voters, good for public television, and good for MPT specifically, because I think if we have more people watching debates, more people are going to become members of MPT. And I think it's good for democracy. And that's ultimately the reason we're doing it. Surely it's good for us. It's nice for us to have a bill that would require us to be allowed on the stage. I think surely it's good for MPT because more people will be watching. But the most important thing is that this is a core democratic value of the campaign, that debate is an important part of democracy. And we've got a bill in Annapolis that we have helped to get drafted and put in that allows us to raise this issue during the 90-day legislative session that starts July 14th. So I'm excited about this. You're going to hear a lot more about it. We've moved it beyond a petition to the place where a delegate is putting in a bill about it.
Yeah, I think folks, senators and delegates in the General Assembly and decision makers at Maryland Public Television have a pretty clear choice. Allow Maryland voters to decide with a well-informed choice based on a debate in front of an audience on a platform that is dedicated to public education, whose positions, whose values, and whose presentation most aligns with what they want to see for the future. Or they can continue to limit the debate based on fairly arbitrary editorial standards that exclude the best ever performing third party or independent candidate for governor in the 20th century or in the 21st century and most of the 19th century. Those editorial standards aren't based on science, aren't based on a vote by Marylanders on who they want to see included or not. That's an arbitrary editorial standard, and this legislation challenges that arbitrary editorial standard in a way that increases inclusion, enhances the debate, and expands public education to include all of the candidates in the general election. And I think it's important to distinguish here. Andy and I are not talking about the primary elections, which can have 15, 20 people. The barrier to entry for a primary is very low. You basically file, maybe you pay a small filing fee if you want to be a candidate, even for governor or U.S. senator, but in a primary. But in a general election, independent candidates and third-party candidates have to work really, really hard to get on the ballot. And they need lots of people collecting signatures, or they need to be the next in line after a successful campaign that's gotten over 1%. It is not easy for an independent or third-party candidate to earn their spot on the general election. And it's not easy, of course, for a Democrat or Republican. They need to win their primary, which sometimes is more contested than others. This year, the Democratic primary for governor might not be that contested. So when we say that qualifying for the general election ballot should be the criteria for determining who's in and who's out, that is not arbitrary. That's based on tens of thousands of signatures in the case of independent voters, or signatures or votes in the case of third parties, or primary votes in the case of Maryland Democratic and Republican candidates. So there is a clear and democratic standard for including all candidates in the debate stage for the general elections.
Right. And the State Board of Elections has already decided and legislated a criteria for determining who a legitimate, viable candidate that voters get to engage with is. It's called ballot access. They have laws about it. And for the governor's race, I don't think there's ever been more than 5 or 6 people that have ever qualified for one of those ballots. I think 5 occurred in 2022. I think that was a high watermark for like 100 years or something like that. So we're not talking about, like, nobody is going to go through the process it takes to get on a general election gubernatorial ballot just so they can get some time on MPT answering questions with other politicians. Just like the state of Maryland has determined the criteria. We should use that criteria, and we should make sure that the taxpayer-funded entity is using that criteria, not the criteria that the politicians who give them their budget and the foundations who give them their donations want them to use. Look, we know that the two parties don't like having third parties in debates, because we understand what happened when Ross Perot was in the debate. When Ross Perot was in the debate in the 1990s, people wanted to vote for Ross Perot. And the two parties realized at the time that they needed to clamp down on that type of thing and make sure that the lesser evil framing was the best, was all that was being presented. And we need to challenge that, not just for ourselves, but for future generations, so that they have access to the debate stage, so that Marylanders can hear their ideas. I don't think if we get on the debate stage, suddenly politics is going to fall apart in Maryland. Wes Moore is a very competent guy, and whatever cold gruel the Republicans put on stage is also going to be a very competent person, right? Like, they can handle these multi-party debates, but what we can't handle is Marylanders not hearing all of their choices, because when Marylanders don't hear all their choices, they're going to be disappointed with the well-polished guy and the cold gruel, and they're going to stay home. They're not going to vote, and they're going to drop out of politics. We think this is an antidote to that. We think it's good for us, good for Maryland, good for public television, and good for democracy.
Yeah. So write to your legislator if you're a Marylander. Write to your state delegate and delegates and senator. Tell them to support this bill. And if you're a Maryland Public Television member, or you know someone who is, you can contact them directly and you can sign our petition. So there's something for everyone to do. This is not a passive topic that we're discussing. This is a very active one. Please get involved. Sign that debate petition. Contact your legislators. We'll be having some more direct tools coming out in the coming weeks to inform those emails going to your legislators. But let's start grassroots and get the momentum going heading into a session that starts in just a few weeks.
Yeah, totally. Okay, wait. Okay. All right, let's do some questions. You want to do some questions?
I'm ready for it.
All right, let's do it. Always a reminder, billionaires own both parties. Vote green. Andy and Owen are your answer to the billionaires. We, in 2026, we're going to reclaim the protest vote. A lot of this stuff is really bad, and we need to protest it. We shouldn't be having water bills that are as high as they are when corporations get to set them. We shouldn't be subsidizing stadiums. We shouldn't be subsidizing data centers. All that stuff is bad. All that stuff is worth protesting. The reason it happens is because billionaires own both parties. Vote green. Andy and Owen. That's your answer. Sorry, had to get that little ad in there first. And let's start with this question. So Mark in Gaithersburg says, as a union teacher burned out on the two parties, how will you concretely protect the blueprint, avoid privatization by stealth, and deliver smaller classes without new unfunded mandates? And how will you show teachers the money and the timeline, not just the message? Whew.
Well, I love this question because too often when you hear burnout and teacher in the same sentence, it's this very tired line in the mainstream media about how teachers are burned out and don't want to teach anymore, and there's a teacher shortage crisis. I mean, that crisis is manufactured by politicians and school systems that don't support committed teachers like Mark. So Mark's not burned out on teaching; he's burned out on the two party, or they're burned out on the two party. So I like the way that Mark flipped that around there. protect the blueprint. I think, this is going to be a multi-year conversation, but it seems like what is starting to happen with all this talk of fiscal crisis is that Democrats in Annapolis promised big. They promised generational change when it came to education, and then weren't willing to do the revenue generation, aka taxing the rich, in order to pay for it. So now they're saying elements, whether they admit it publicly or not, elements of the blueprint that are at risk, and that's due to lack of political boldness to go out and tax corporations and billionaires.
Yeah, and I hope Mark is in the union that is democratic and how it interacts with its members and its endorsements. But if Mark is a member of the MSEA, which is the biggest biggest education union for teachers in the state, then what happened for him in October was September, October.
It was October, yeah, mid-October.
Yeah, in October, the MSEA decided to use their Westmore First strategy. Or they call it incumbent first strategy, but I think in this case it's the Westmore First strategy. And instead of allowing me and Owen and other candidates for governor to present to their members at their big convention in Ocean City, they simply decided to allow members to vote up or down on whether to support incumbents or not. They sent us a nice email that explained this process to us, and they put us in their newsletter, which we appreciate. But we think that any year in which the sitting governor that they just endorsed is about to try to take a second attempt to cut the spending for the generational investment in public education that is represented by the blueprint, it would have been good to allow us to make our case. But that's okay. We don't care about the leadership of these unions. They're just as corrupt as the politicians. We care about the people who are in these unions like Mark, and we're going to have these kind of conversations. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that on every single opportunity, we lay out our vision that Westmore is going to try to cut the blueprint funding again, like he did last year. At the beginning of last year's budget cycle, Westmore came in and he had taken this generational promise for public education, and he had proposed a bunch of cuts to it in order to make up for his political irresponsibility and failing to raise revenue in the way that he said he would when he ran in 2022. In 2022, he campaigned on taxing wealthy people like himself at a higher rate, but he refused to do it for 2 years because it was politically inconvenient for him, and instead, he proposed it last year in the middle of a fiscal crisis. This year, we covered last week, more fiscal crisis is coming, more cuts are coming, and the first thing they're going to cut is this blueprint funding, because it is a thing that they never had any intention of paying for. They always had every intention of doing exactly what they're doing right now, which is promising teachers, students, and communities that they were going to make record investments in their education funding, and then and that they were going to do it over a decade. They never intended to do it over a decade. If they did, they would have raised the revenue to pay for it as soon as they tried to pass it and the budget office told them to do it. So what we're going to see next year is Westmore spending the year telling us that he's going to cut the blueprint in order to save the blueprint. And what we're going to be telling the press, what we're going to be telling Mark, and what we're going to be telling Westmore is, you made this promise and you have to live up to it, because our teachers, our students, and our schools and our communities are dependent on it. We should also look for him to try to privatize the jobs that are done by paraprofessional educators right now. He's going to use his ed tech buddies in New York and his failed ed tech startup, and he's going to try to come in here and offer to have technology and AI like Claude that he brought into the benefits departments last week, taking away these jobs of hardworking people in our schools. Westmore is not pro-education, and it is a travesty and a shame that the MSEA endorsed him before they even saw him threaten to take away their prized big generational win. I was on a podcast a few weeks ago, and somebody described them as the most powerful union in the state. And I said, not anymore. They have given up their power. Watch them bend the knee and cower to this neoliberal who is going to try to cut education funding, privatize their jobs, and offshore as much as he can. So, Mark, I don't know what to tell you. We're going to do the best we can to fight for you and the other teachers who believed your union and your governor when they told you about that they were investing in this education. And we're going to make sure we hold them to account for the austerity cuts that they're going to propose, because it's coming. I guarantee it. This is going to be the year where Westmore tells us we have to cut education funding in order to save education funding. He's going to blame Trump. He's going to blame Republicans, but it's his fault and it's the union's fault.
We'll see what happens when we don't have guests. When we have guests, we're on our best behavior. And when it's just the two of us on the show, we let the skeletons out of the closet. So I of course, agree, and I'm aligned with everything Andy just said. But, I will say, I'm a MSCA member. I love my union. I worked hard and took a lot of risks to my livelihood, to my economic stability, to my relationships with people in my workplace to form one of the first new teachers union locals at my community college, affiliated with MSCA in many years. And so expecting just a basic level of democracy in which rank and file members could listen to all the choices and decide which one best represented their interests, or how they could extract concessions from the incumbent by hearing out challengers. That wasn't too much to expect. Workplace democracy isn't just about building power in the workplace. It's also about union democracy. And I don't think we really saw that with this October endorsement. So I hope, going forward, MSCA will do better. And I'm grateful for the other unions around the state that are and at least inviting us to engage in their process. They may not endorse us. They may not endorse anyone, but they recognize there's an opportunity to use their power rather than to give it away at even before the election year cycle has fully begun.
Yeah, we can talk about no kings all we want, but MSCA just went and bent the knee to Westmore without even asking, are you going to cut the blueprint? When it's very clear he's going to cut the blueprint, because last year he tried to cut the blueprint. And there's a fiscal crisis coming again this year, and that's going to be the first thing he cuts. It's the only thing. It's part of the plan. He never intended to have this be 10 years worth of funding. He said it in order to get votes, and now he's gonna sell you a bill of goods. So
the other thing that I'll just say real quick before we go on, the other thing that we should talk about that I think Mark and other rank and file public sector union members may be interested in is the right to strike. Right? You want to talk about how Maryland Democrats in Annapolis have constrained the power of organized labor and turned unions into lobbyists. It's by taking away the right to strike, which is a pretty basic right, even in most blue states around the country and certainly around the world. If you don't have the right to strike and withhold your labor, you're not a fully fledged union in some ways, because all you can do is contract negotiations, lobbying, which makes you dependent on politicians, and some more wildcat disrupting the labor piece at the grassroots rank and file level. So there's going to be pressure to bring legislation to Annapolis for all public sector workers, not just teachers, not just educators, to have their right to strike, and then we'll start seeing movement on the issues that Mark is talking about, money and timeline, and not just empty hot air promises.
Yep, totally. And I want to lift up Baltimore Teachers Union here. Baltimore Teachers Union went the opposite direction of the MSCA, and they invited us to participate in their process. And so Mark and anybody else interested in education policy, we will be doing a lot of work on that this week or this month. We'll be publishing our questionnaire from BTU, and we are going to focus on making sure that we're providing real and concrete answers to the teachers and the educators like Mark, who are worried that their burnout is because of their bosses and because of the union bosses and the politicians screwing them over again and again. And we're going to stand up and we're going to offer something that is real for them, and we're going to demand the Democrats meet the promise they made when they offered the blueprint as their decade-long investment in public education. So thank you, Mark. get in touch, ideas@gogreen2026.com. We'd love to hear your ideas about this, and we'll do what we can to listen and incorporate as much of that as we can into the platform. Whew. All right, I'm ready. Mark got me going there. So you ready for the next one? Okay. I'll take this one. I'll start this one. So Amy, who's watching on YouTube, said, I'm honestly confused at an earlier segment when you said that you were merely looking for 100,000 votes. Why not shout from the rooftop that you were in it to win it? There's something very peculiar to me about these reasoned and very necessary critiques of the dim mindset in light of your declaration that your race isn't being won with the intent to win against the Dems. This is a great question, Amy. And so I want to take it on a couple of levels. The first one is I want to be very realistic about how difficult it is to make change against the two-party system. The media, the money, and the political system is very, very entrenched. And so when we say we're going to get 4% and we're aiming to get 100,000 votes, we are not trying to soft pedal how difficult that is. We are not trying to make it easy for ourselves. We are, in fact, going to shout these critiques from the rooftops from every corner of the state possible. But our look at the data and our look at the history says that what we think is a performance that begins to create a step change in the way that parties like ours can operate and can define winning is to get to that 100,000 vote threshold. So we may get to a place where it feels like we are doing even better, where it feels like we might be in this to win it. But if we start to get in it, if we start to poll internally in Wes Moore's polls anywhere close to a place that is going to have him win it, the amount of money that's going to come in from the Governors Association, from Wes Moore, from the billionaire corporations that he's constantly supporting, and from the network of shady PACs that back him up is going to be so intense that we're going to have a hard time fighting against it, even if we qualify for that public financing money. So we are trying to do this in order to be realistic for our supporters, because if we get to election night and we are back at Maggie's farm and we are hosting a party and we have 100,000 votes, we are going to think that is a historic accomplishment that has shifted the ground in a way that allows us to fight back, fight for communities, fight for teachers. We don't want our supporters to think we're going to win and not be excited about 100,000 votes, not be excited about us hitting our goals. I think Owen and I have both been in these situations in the past where we've been on campaigns where the campaign has a historic performance, but the candidate is not being honest and realistic about how difficult it is to fight against the two-party system. And so the supporters leave after a historic performance that could redefine victory, feel like they've lost, feel like they've been lied to, and feel disappointed. So we are trying to avoid that. Might we catch fire and get 200, 300, 400,000 votes? That would be amazing. And it would be the type of thing that they write books about in American political science and political history. That could happen. But we got to get to 100,000 to get to 200. We got to get to 200 to get to 300. And we're trying to set goals and expectations that we think are reasonably possible, but actually really difficult, so that we can be honest with folks like Amy, folks like Mark, and folks watching about what they can expect November of next year.
Yeah. So you kind of framed it from the importance of realism. I'm going to take a slightly different tack, which is the importance of pessimism, right? The pessimistic viewpoint is that things are bad and have always been bad, but might get better, and it might get better in surprising ways. So if you look at U.S. history, it has not been kind to politicians or candidates for office who have the kind of views that Andy and I have. So historically speaking, the U.S. Electoral system was designed to keep plantation owners and slave owners and slave traders and white men in power, and historically have not been about empowering folks with more revolutionary ideas to make change through the electoral process. And so I think that that could lead us to feel pessimistic, but also we have a lot of revolutionary fervor. We believe that we can change systems, and that the way to do that is by pushing on them from the fringes, pushing on them from the outside, and that sometimes there are cleavages and openings. And the last time we saw that in U.S. history was with, an emancipatory Republican Party, in the 1850s. So there are possibilities, but I think even by running the kind of campaign that we've discussed, we are in fact winning. So my goal is not to be lieutenant governor. I'm a teacher. I love teaching. I want to keep teaching. And if Andy and I did win, I would move to abolish the position of lieutenant governor. We don't need it. We don't need to pay that person $175,000 and give them a state trooper to drive them around when their job description is duties as assigned by the governor. So even if we did win, Amy, I would get rid of my position and wouldn't serve for too long as your lieutenant governor. But I think that, you're right to push us to dream big, but we also, I think, would benefit from a statewide campaign that, that under promises and over delivers rather than the opposite. Folks are really sick and tired of politicians promising the moon and then getting elected and coming up short. And so through our campaign, we want to do the work as well as we can in order to create platforms for local activists and future Green Party candidates to run and succeed more than we did. So we're trying to set a high watermark, which is no small thing.
Yeah, totally. And Amy, this is a conversation we're happy to keep having, but I did want to make sure we answered this question because I said in the comments that we would answer it. So I'm happy to take it. You want to do one more of these?
Sure.
You want to do this one from Alan?
Yeah. I remember Alan asking this question a few weeks ago. This is a good one. And, for folks who don't know, so Alan's question, if you're just listening, is how did Zoran Mamdani win affect left-leaning parties? And for folks who don't know, I grew up in New York. I lived there until I was 17. Lived in New York City when I was a little kid. So this was definitely a race that I was paying close attention to. I had a really dear friend of mine who never really volunteered on electoral campaigns, who's from Maryland originally, but who really felt inspired to be a part of Mamdani's campaign because of the Palestine solidarity work he had been doing over the long haul and seeing opportunities to advance justice in that area through this campaign. And so, how did Mamdani's win affect left-leaning parties? I think it led some left-leaning parties to sharpen our analysis about why we should exist and why we should succeed and grow, right? If anytime a left candidate, whether it's Bernie or Mamdani, does well, some folks who have more centrist views kind of use that success on the left fringe of the Democratic Party to say, oh, well, see, you can do this within the Democratic Party, even though they don't do so in good faith by pointing out the limits of what a mayor of New York or a single senator from Vermont can do. And I think just as an organizer, any good organizing campaign requires inside pressure, organizational pressure brought to bear by folks who have a stake within an organization, in this case, the Democratic Party, and pressure outside of it. So the threat of a Dem exit when Dems do poorly, and I'm an example of that. I left the Democratic Party after the 2016 primary, which elite Democrats conspired against Bernie Sanders to deprive him of that victory. So I think, to answer your question succinctly, it pressured us to up our game, and it also gave us some very clear tactical strategic takeaways, like the importance of ranked choice voting and like the importance of public campaign financing.
Yeah, I think those are totally good answers, and I really appreciate this question from Alan. It feels like it could be a whole show unto itself. The BRJA event that we did with Lawrence and I and Dottie Burt Markowitz answered some of these questions a little bit, but let me offer a couple of things here on this. The first thing is, I think it's great when people within the Democratic Party are operating at it from a more socialist, more socialist, more democratic socialist perspective. I would rather have folks like that in the Democratic Party than the other options. I would have rather had Mamdani win than any of the two Democrats he was running against, the sex pest and the guy who works for Trump, right? Like, these are bad candidates, and I think that New York is better for Mamdani having won. I think that our philosophy toward third parties is that we want a multi-party system. We don't want to replace the Democrats. So I think that getting to a multi-party system is more likely when there are people on the left side of the Democratic Party who are doing the work that they need to do in order to bring the party to some of the issues that Mamdani had. At the end of the day, he had a relentless focus. He had a relentless focus on affordability. He had a relentless focus on economic justice. And I think people were willing to listen to that message. So I think there's a lesson in that. I also think that there is a lesson about how he was willing to drift on policing issues in a way that really sold out a lot of Black folks and a lot of grassroots people who were working with him toward challenging the police state, abolishing the way that the current practices, and shifting police funding to other things. And I think had there been a Green on that stage with Curtis Lewa and Mamdani and Cuomo, there would have been somebody to hold his feet to the fire on some of the original promises that he had made on policing. So even his victory, to me, doesn't say we shouldn't have Greens running. It says we need to have Greens running as political gravity, so that when a candidate like Mamdani is pulled to the center, there's somebody pulling him back and fighting for some of the votes that would have gone to him. The fighting for some of the votes that help shape issues like policing. So I think that's the other thing. The third thing I would say is his operation was great. One of the most impressive things I think about this campaign was that it changed the mind of voters through door knocking and through its communication strategies. At the beginning of the year, Howie Hawkins and I were talking about this on his podcast earlier this summer. At the beginning of the year, the major issues for New Yorkers in polling were public safety related, were fear-based, were homelessness, were things like that. By the end of the Democratic primary, affordability, housing, transit, and those type of things were the main issues that New Yorkers cared about. The ability to change public opinion through door knocking and through organizing is really a thing that we should study for a long time, because that is a shift in public opinion that is meaningful. Did we get everything we wanted to get out of this? Of course we didn't. He's a Democratic Party candidate in New York running as mayor. There's a lot of things that we need to question. There's some limitations. All of that is true. But all in all, it's the best person that could have won of the people that were running for that position. It gives us some clues. And I think it shows the need to have multiple parties, even if the Democrat is pretty cool and pretty young and pretty nice and has a pro-immigrant message and all of that stuff. There's still a need to have them there in order to exert that leverage and that influence, so they don't get drifted toward the center like Mamdani did on some policing issues.
Yeah, and imagine if there were a few Greens on the New York City Council, right? For example, to really reinforce your point. I mean, Andy was talking about the political gravity in the course of the campaign and on the debate stage. But Alan, and other folks listening, can you imagine if there were just a few members of the New York City Council who were elected Greens instead of the current, Democratic supermajority, soon to possibly be led by a much more moderate Democrat and a few Republicans? If there were a multi-party city council and Mamdani could triangulate when it was in the interests of the movement forces that brought him into executive office with a multi-party legislative branch of city government, then he would be in a much better position to make good on his campaign promises and enact his agenda in a less diluted way. So I think it operates on multiple levels. It's not just how could Democrats compete with him, or how could they compete with similar progressive or democratic socialist Democrats. But if we look at, Camp Gordon in Minneapolis, for example, he was a Green on the city council for many terms, and he worked with progressive and more moderate Democratic mayors and the city council colleagues to advance green politics. So these things aren't necessarily zero sum, especially when we have the conditions for multi-party democracies to thrive.
Yep, totally. And somebody asked me, I was on the Mid Maryland Voters show, which is one of my favorite shows to go on. I don't agree with them on everything, but we have good conversations. And I think we're modeling that multi-party democracy in a way that is not always how we expect it. But anyway, when I was on their show, they asked me what it meant for the governor's race. And I said, look, I don't think there's going to be anybody with Mamdani's politics running in the Democratic Party, and I certainly don't think they're going to get the nomination. So if you want somebody with Mamdani's politics and you get them through a Democratic primary, and that's good enough for you, great, support that person, vote for that person. We will be a better state if they get elected. But if you look at the governor's election next year and you see me, Wes Moore, a generic Republican, a libertarian, and a working class party person, and you see our running mates on there, and you decide, I don't see a Mamdani on the Democratic side of this, the closest I think you're going to get to politics that are like Mamdani's on Israel, on police, on affordability, on public good, and on the democracy in the Maryland we deserve is us. And so if you like what you see there, don't vote for the guy who's making deals with data centers. Don't vote for the guy who's key campaign advisors or leaders of big law firms. Don't vote for the guy who is hobnobbing with billionaires so that he can get more money from them. Vote for the people who are for the people. Vote for the people who are fighting for the Maryland we deserve, not the Maryland that Wes Moore thinks that we have to deal with. So, I think this is a good question from Alan. We've been meaning to get to it from a while. I'm glad we got to it tonight. All of these things are things and themes that we could develop on and will be developing on as we go into 2026. And I really encourage folks to keep the questions coming. I see Theo's got his question in there about what does Maryland's make halal $8 again? I don't have an answer to that right away, but we can take that question and make it one for next week if that works for you, Owen, and for you, Theo.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Alan, I'm glad that you liked our answer to that question. Okay, we are getting toward wrap-up time here, Owen. This was a great show. I really enjoyed it. We didn't have a guest, but we still managed to talk for, some time indeed. But how did you feel about the show tonight?
Yeah, I felt great. The way we recapped some of our small victories in November and platformed our allies who are doing the important organizing work out in Allegany County. Really, really important. I also can I drop a little teaser for January here? If you're one of those folks who, follows Annapolis politics, closely, I want to drop a little teaser that we are going to have a former member of the Maryland General Assembly on here, and he's going to be bringing some tea. So tune in mid-January for that. No names just yet, but yeah, I'm excited about obviously we want to keep the focus on activists, but this is a special case, and he's definitely a fellow traveler for sure.
I got to figure out what, they got all these sound effects in here, and so far the only one I'm using is the clap one.
Is there a Jeopardy kind of doing it? Like,
wait, let's see. What about this one? That's just scary. No, we're never using that one again. That one feels like we'll find a good Jeopardy one or a good other one in here. So yeah, I thought this show was great. I'm really glad we got to do some questions tonight. I do hope that we'll have a guest back next week. And one of the things that we're hoping to do very soon is to bring some of the folks that are working with us on our campaign team on board. We had a great campaign team meeting this weekend. It has been an objective for us for a while to get the various people who are working with us in different ways together. We had that meeting this week. It was a good start, and I think over maybe December and during January, you're going to start to see some of the folks that are working with us on our campaign team, the working people, the students that are doing this in their free time, that are helping out where they can, come on and be some of our guests, because we think it's important to highlight all of those folks and the work they bring to the table and the work they're doing for the campaign. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for us to come to a place near you and host one of these library meetings. Invite us out if you want to talk to us. We are excited to be going into 2026. We think we got a lot of good energy at the beginning of this. We talked about the night is dark, the temperature is cold, and the energy is high. And I think an hour and 50 minutes in, I still feel that way. I do want to make a final, sort of a reminder here that we are constantly working in order to get Marylanders to donate to us so that we can qualify for those public financing dollars and really be able to take this critique to the billboards, to the streets, hire people, do all of that stuff that's going to come when we qualify for this public financing. So if you can go to gogreen2026.com/donate and donate anywhere between $5 and $250. Each Maryland donor helps us to get there. We're happy to have donations from outside of Maryland. They don't count for matching, but they do help us to have money. So I'm trying to make it so that this is a thing that we incorporate into every piece we do. It's hard for me, but it's got to be a thing that happens, because securing that money is key to us achieving the rest of the goals that we have. And I think we're well on our track. We're well on our way. I think we're in the best position any Green Party candidate campaign that I've ever been in is in the year coming out of the odd number election into the year that we're in. I can't wait for the rest of December. I can't wait for the rest of January. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good night. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.